All right, so we're back. Another video assignment for the Sonoran Desert Institute. This is for the hammer-fired handgun course from the Handgun Specialist program. And to keep things straightforward, we're just gonna dive into part one, and that's just a discussion about muzzle devices and compensators that can go on a handgun. Now, starting with like your basic muzzle, well, it's not really a muzzle device, but your basic standard configuration of the muzzle of a pistol is we have your regular crown. So there's no threads, no break on it or nothing. This is just standard. It's what most pistols are going to come as. But when you start diving into the territory of compensators, you can find handguns on the market with, compensators built into them, or even ported barrels if you're into spending that kind of money. But this is my everyday carry. This is a Shadow Systems MR920. It's like a Glock 19 clone, basically. And now this one's gonna have your threaded barrel. Typically, you'd use that. Obviously those threads are for some sort of muzzle device, whether it's a suppressor or a compensator. Shadow Systems does have their own compensator that can go on these threaded barrels. And then Radian also has the ramjet system, which I'm pretty sure comes in a kit with a barrel and the muzzle device as well, because I think it's a proprietary compensator for that barrel. Now, getting to recoil rod or recoil guide rod mounted compensators, you got ones like this. So this is the Strike Industries G2 mass driver. But using this to explain what compensators do, if you ever watch the slow-mo videos of the muzzle of a gun whenever they fire it, and you'll notice that there's a lot of powder burn, a lot of propulsion and fire and explosion, a lot of force going out of that muzzle, causing a lot of force. That's where a lot of your recoil comes from. Now, if you redirect those gases out of these ports going up, and in this case, they actually go out to the sides too, that's going to reduce your muzzle rise. Another thing that contributes to muzzle rise is the slide reciprocating when you fire it. Now, all that propulsion going out and the mass of the slide moving and stuff, that's happening above your hand, which is causing the gun to go up and down. So on top of redirecting gases up to keep the muzzle down, this particular one, the mass driver, that's where it gets its name. It's actually on a spring mechanism, if you notice, just like this. Now, when you fire this gun, those gases are going to go out just like a normal compensator, but it's also going to force the mass of the muzzle device itself forward while the slide is moving back. So you're not only mitigating recoil through gas propulsion, but you're also mitigating it through mass counteraction. Because as this goes forward, you got a mass moving that way, and you have a mass moving this way from the slide. Now, you also have like frame-mounted muzzle devices or frame-mounted compensators, slide-mounted compensators, I think. I have to brush up on that one. But you also have ported barrels too. Now, ported barrels are kind of tricky because you're bleeding off a lot of the gas, or not a lot, but some of the gas that is used to cycle that firearm. All right, now when starting any video, you guys know the drill. We always got to clear the firearm. No live ammunition in the workspace, and we can't forget our safety glasses. So if you've watched my other videos from the other two handgun specialist courses, it was the revolver and the striker fired course. We did a project in those classes where we stoned and polished the sear surfaces and some of the other surfaces that interact with the fire control group. And we're basically doing the same thing here. So it's gonna be a little familiar to y'all, but we have to get a trigger pull reference point before the job is done. And then we're gonna do another trigger pull test after we polish those surfaces. Now, before doing the trigger work, these are our trigger pull readings. So in double action, we had pretty much 11.1, and then in single action, we had 4.3. Now, also before we dive into the project, I just want to assess trigger feel. So off camera, I kind of did a little trigger feel test. Now in double action, it's pretty tough. I'm actually surprised I was able to get a reading on the trigger pull gauge, because this only goes up to 12 pounds and it feels like more than 12, but we averaged 11. In single action, it feels great. There's a little bit of take up, which is, by design, but when you hit that wall, there's almost no creep. But I'm sure we'll still see a difference, at least in trigger pull in the single action mode, but I'm hoping to see a big difference in the double action. So I'm gonna go ahead and shut the camera off. I'm gonna take this apart because that's a task with this particular firearm, and then we'll come back. So stoning and polishing these parts, it's a little tedious, especially with how small they are. Pretty sure I did it on a few more parts than what was required for this assignment. But I just took it upon myself to go over the mechanics of the firearm and polish what I feel like need to be polished that relates to trigger feel. With stoning parts, you're not trying to necessarily take off material, and you're definitely not trying to change the geometry of the part, especially when it comes to sears. I can't really stress that enough, how important that is. But you're basically just cleaning up the edges without compromising the actual shape or geometry of the piece itself. The most time-consuming part was applying blue to the hammer and reassembling it to see where the high spots were. Luckily, I only had to do it once, and then the second time I applied the layout dye, it was even wear across. After that, it's just a matter of applying some polishing compound, whatever you want to call it, onto a felt Dremel bit, and just polishing those up and then cleaning it up. Now it's time to just apply some oil on these bad boys and lube them up, to say the least. Okay, so we've got the gun back together after polishing. I figured I'd show you, you can kind of see some of the shiny spots where I polished it. It's actually kind of satisfying to look at that. And then I always like seeing a shiny firing pin safety. It's always nice. So yeah, we're gonna throw this back together, and then we're gonna do a trigger pull assessment and compare our findings. These are the numbers after we did the trigger job. So I mentioned in, I think, the revolver video that when you do the polishing jobs, you're not necessarily chasing a lighter trigger pull, you're chasing a better feel. That's going to be like your take up, your creep, the break of the sear, you know what I mean. But we did, however, go down in trigger pull weight. So for double action, we went from 11.1 to 10.6, and then for single action, we went from 4.3 to 4 even. Now I do want to point out that the trigger feel, as far as that goes, is in single action, I didn't notice too much of a difference because it was already pretty good to begin with. It was a really clean break. I do notice it's a little bit smoother slightly, but what I really noticed the difference is double action. So before I'd get to the wall, you know, I'm at the half cock position and I feel a lot of resistance, almost like it's not timed right, but now I don't get that feeling, and it just breaks. So that's pretty satisfying to see. I always like feeling and seeing the performance difference in the work that I do. All right, now we've got some aftermarket springs here. These are provided as lab tools for the course. This might look a little familiar to you. The revolver course and the striker fired course both had these. So we're gonna go ahead and off camera install those, and we're gonna reassess the trigger pull. All right, so we got the new springs in. I got the old springs right here. And I tell you what, taking this hammer fired course, you're gonna get really good at removing and installing these torsion springs. So we're gonna do double action first. We're gonna do 5 pulls. We're gonna go ahead and do some single action now. This should be really low. All right, so these aftermarket spring kits are really where things start to get real. So you saw the other ones, just with the polishing job, we went down about a ½ pound. But here, we went from 11 to 8.5 on double action, which is awesome. And then we went all the way down to 2.9 pounds on single action. Now, the first thing I noticed, it was actually before I even finished putting it back together, was how light the hammer was to cock back. Typically, when you're assembling your gun, you want to function check the parts as you finish putting them in. That way, when you finish putting it together, you're not realizing you did something wrong and having to take it all apart and all that crap. Double action feels way better. And single action is insanely nice. It already had like no creep to begin with, but now it has like 0 creep whatsoever. So considering the value of this gun, it's got a pretty nice sear for what it is. So yeah, not bad. But now we're just gonna do another function check and then do a little drop test. Now, if you haven't seen yet, little drop test, you just whack around the sear area with the hammer. All right, checks out. So there you have it. That's you know, a stoning and polishing job for the SAR B6. I'm definitely not a master at it yet. I've only done it 3 times, I guess, since the 3rd class I've had to do it. It's actually quite satisfying before I do the task. It's like, ooh, I don't know, but I don't know. Once I get in the groove of things, it's like work, you know. I don't want to kind of lazy at work, and then once I start turning wrenches, I'm just in the groove, and you know how it goes. But as most of you know, people who follow my channel, I'm switching back to ammunition manufacturing. So I mean, that's essentially what I'm getting my FFL for. I'm getting an 07 FFL, so it kind of gives me the authorization to do gunsmithing, but that's not primarily what I want to be doing. So I may be doing jobs like this here and there in the future for like family and friends, but I've done this enough times to where I feel comfortable doing it on my own guns. I actually polished my carry gun, the Shadow Systems, and then I polished 19X as well. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I don't think it's perfect, but maybe to like a customer, they might be like, oh man, that's a huge difference. So I don't know. If somebody were to ask me to do a stoning and polishing job, or just, they'd probably just say trigger job, I'd probably take on the task because I feel like I could do it confidently. I think the main thing is just safety and like making sure you're not messing up the sear surfaces. As an FFL, you pay for liability insurance for your services, but you pray that you never have to use it. But yeah, so that's a wrap for today. And then next week is my last SDI video. Don't be afraid to comment down below some stuff you want to see. If you want to see more about SDI, you want to maybe do some of this stuff yourself, I'll put the link down below as well. But yeah, without further ado, just stay strapped. Peace.